Hey everybody, my name is Ed. Okay, I thought today it might be interesting to take a look at Mouse by Art Spiegelman, written and drawn by Art Spiegelman. There's actually two volumes of this. There's volume one, which I have here, My Father Bleeds History, and there's volume two. This originally came out in 1986, and it's pretty much thought of as kind of a game changer when it comes to comics, the comic industries, getting comics to be thought of as a more serious art form. Um, Actually, 1986 was a pretty interesting year when you think about it. Uh, this came out that year. Uh, Dark Knight Returns came out. Watchmen came out. Also, Teenage Mutant Turtle Ninjas really took off. And the interesting thing about that, like I said, 1986 is kind of a watershed year. And it's because those, and there are other things going on, of course, but those particular comics really had a big impact in very different ways in how people were thinking of comic books, or I should say American comic books. And I think it had an effect, not just on the audience, but on artists and people within the industry as well. Now, the premise for people who don't know is basically this is the true story of Art Spiegelman's dad, who lived in Germany during the Nazi regime, and basically him living in Germany, uh, going through the Holocaust, and living through going to Auschwitz, I believe. And the twist is the story is told in this very symbolic way, where the Germans are represented by cats, the Jewish people are mice, and Polish people are pigs. Now, I believe. Well, let's do it this way. This here, what I have here, was originally serialized in this magazine-sized comic book anthology called Raw, and they do that was edited by Art Spiegelman and his wife Frances, and they would do a chapter, whenever it came out, and then this is the collected volume. I believe he did an earlier, short story for some underground comic back in the mid '70s, perhaps, where with the same premise. But the art style is a little bit different, or it's actually a little bit more cartoony than what he ended up using here. But like I said, this is the more ambitious version. Very deep, very layered, very textured. I'd even say kind of meta-textural in a way. So, well, we'll get to that in a moment. Now, the art style he uses for the book is, I would describe it as simple, but not simplistic, if that makes any sense. It's very stark, very bold blacks and whites. There's shading, there's cross hatching, there's gray tones, there's really solid things he does as far as like layouts and composition, but nothing very fancy or anything like that. And I actually think it helps the comic. It actually draws you in a little bit more than, well, it does succeed in drawing you in. After a while, you're just caught up in the story. You're not really paying that much attention to, the I don't want to call it a gimmick, but you accept, I should say, you accept the symbolism. Uh, Here, just to give you an example of how things sort of look here, you can see that he's not really doing a whole ton of fancy things, even as far as like facial expressions. The one or two lines are just enough to I'll let you know what's going on, let you know what the characters are kind of feeling and thinking, and it really works for the comic. There's an interesting thing here where within this comic they reprint an earlier story. Art Spiegelman is talking to his dad and his dad's second wife about being a cartoonist, and his folks get a hold of one of his earlier comics, and this is about Art Spiegelman's mom committing suicide or actually how his suicide actually affected Art. And you can see the style is a little bit different than the style of the rest of the comic. And I guess this was reprinted in some other underground comic from the 70s. Right now, I can't remember what the name of it was called, but it's really interesting because you have this kind of, I don't know what you call that, woodcut style, and just kind of has a whole surrealistic vibe to it. There's an oh, here's another thing where where it shows how Spiegelman is able to do a lot of detail when he wants to, and he's able to achieve a real solid sense of balance. Again, when it comes to composing inside of the panels as well as the larger page. So it's not that he can't draw more complex images and layouts. It's just that he chooses not to. Here's an interesting bit of symbolism here where Vlad is talking about disguising himself in Poland, and he's hiding the fact that he's Jewish. So Art is drawing him as a mouse wearing a pig's mask. So I kind of thought that was an interesting bit of kind of turning the symbolism on, on itself. Another interesting thing is what you're actually getting is two stories. Of course, we're getting the true life stories or the true life experiences of Art Spiegelman's dad as he lived in the past. But there's also a present story going on, which is basically Art interviewing his dad in order to get material, to do the book. And it's you get to see Art and his dad talking, and uh, Art and his father actually have kind of a strained relationship. It's implied, at least here, that they kind of grew apart after Art's mom, Valdek's first wife, died, and you know sometimes they would talk, sometimes they wouldn't talk, and them getting together these days kind of brings out the difference of their personalities and their worldviews and things like that. We get to see Valdek's relationship with his second wife, which maybe isn't the greatest thing it could possibly be as well. So you have that really interesting family dynamic thing going on there. Of course, contrasting that with the type of person that Valdek is now versus the type of person who he was back in World War II. Him having to do what he had to do and make deals with people, doing his best to try to protect his wife and their few friends and their family and things like that. So, like I said, you've got this really interesting human dynamic going on. On one hand, it's the people reacting to the tragedies of history, as well as people reacting to each other in their own little family bubble or whatever. So I thought that was really interesting. There's actually a pretty interesting panel in here where Art shows a little self-awareness, where he's talking to the second wife, Malia, Mala. I can't remember right the second, but he's talking to Valdek's second wife, and he says something to the effect of like, "Yeah, I really want to be honest, and I really want to be as truthful as possible, but I'm a little bit afraid that I might be making my dad look like kind of a caricature of the old miserly Jewish guy or whatever." So I thought that bit was interesting as well. But yeah, Malls has gotten multiple awards, a lot of critical acclaim, a lot of analysis. Definitely something you'd want to check out if you're interested in comics as literature, comic books as biography, comic books as history, or just seeing different way that graphic literature or graphic novels or sequential art, if you will, um, can be stretched as far as content. Anyway, that's it for this review or overview. I've got to thank you very much. Thanks for watching, and you guys all have a good day.